and welcome everyone. I'm Arun Pattabhiraman, CMO at Sprinklr, and your host for today's webinar. Over the past 2 decades, I've had the opportunity and privilege to lead marketing at both B2B and B2C brands. And I can say that in my experience, at least, B2B marketing seems like a much harder job. Clearly, sales cycles are much longer. There are many decision makers in the mix, fewer channels to reach and engage your audience. And truth be told, it's also much harder to measure and articulate the value of your marketing investments and true ROI. Not only that, I think with marketing, sales, and customer service teams using multiple tools to engage with customers, it is often difficult to deliver a consistent and unified customer experience. Today, we have an exciting panel to discuss some of these biggest challenges and trends that are shaping the environment for B2B marketers and learn best practices to navigate them. My first guest on the panel is Kelsey Chickering. Kelsey is a principal analyst at Forrester, focused on media as it relates to marketing strategy. She brings strategic thinking grounded in a deep understanding of the media and advertising ecosystem to clients. Her research uncovers best practices, emerging trends, and critical shifts in consumer behavior that impact how brands should behave in an ever evolving media landscape. Also on the panel today, we have Andrew Kaplan, who is the Director of Product Marketing at LinkedIn, where he and his team lead go to market for LinkedIn's advertising platform and marketing APIs. Kelsey and Andrew, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I would first like to invite Kelsey to share some of the findings from our recent study that we commissioned through Forrester to understand the biggest challenges that B2B marketers face today. Kelsey, why don't you get us started?
Sounds good. Thank you so much for the introduction. So Sprinklr commissioned a study with Forrester, and what we wanted to do was get a better understanding of just the challenges that B2B marketers are up against when they're trying to develop a consistent and a cohesive strategy across different customer touch points in the journey. So in this study, we surveyed over 300 global marketing decision makers, and we conducted 3 qualitative interviews. So there's a mix of B2B marketers and channel partners. And as I mentioned, what we were really trying to do is gain that better understanding of what are the challenges that marketers are up against and what are they doing to combat these challenges in the marketplace, which we'll spend some good time talking about some of the findings right now and then some discussion a little bit later on in the webinar. To ground us in the makeup of the different stakeholders that we talked to and that we surveyed, this was a global study. So we had representation from North America, EMEA, APAC, and we spoke to many different types of companies that were ranging in size, in industry, everything from technology to retail. So we also, in addition to the survey that we ran, we also did a series of qualitative interviews and wanted to talk to a mix of different marketers. So we talked to a channel partner, someone who was looking at product marketing to see from the channel perspective, what challenges are they seeing, what solutions are they providing. And then from the B2B marketer side, we talked to 2 different B2B marketers, again, to understand the challenges that they're up against and what types of strategies that they're deploying on their end to make it more connected and successful media strategy. So our research revealed 4 key challenges for marketers. The first is a challenging marketing landscape. The second, inconsistent brand experience. The third, point solution chaos. And then finally, creative personalization at scale. And I will spend a little bit of time going into each of these different challenges and the data that we found to support it. So the changing marketing landscape. What we found is that customers have really high expectations across the different channels that they go to. And when we look at the marketing landscape, it's shifting really dramatically. So it's impacting the types of touch points that are actually available for buyers, along with more limited access to customer data. So as it relates to these high expectations, we found that 90% of the respondents in our survey say that the number of buyer touch points is actually growing for them because buyers are interacting across so many different touch points. This, of course, then complicates your media strategy as you're building out your plan. And the reality is, with these high expectations, they also want a consistent experience of the brand across their journey. So as customer goes from one channel to the next, they expect a brand to show up with similar values, similar look and feel, and consistency across those channels. One channel partner actually told us that, it should feel like their experience with their company is holistic and continuous. So with all of this comes increasing channel complexity. 83% of the marketers that we surveyed have increased the number of channels and channel partners that they have worked with in the last 2 years. So this increase is just making the landscape more and more complex for them to navigate. Everything from deciding where to invest to what type of content you actually show up with in these different channels. And market forces impact the media effectiveness. 64% report that an increase in these buyer touch points is actually impacting their media effectiveness. So we're seeing the landscape is getting more complicated. Consumers expect this consistent experience across all of these new buyer touch points, and it's actually impacting the effectiveness of the media plans that marketers are putting forth, which is really making it more complex for them to navigate and important for them to think about how things like these increased touch points, privacy regulations, and cookie deprecation all have made their media less effective. And I've mentioned a few times now this inconsistent brand experience. This was another theme and challenge that we saw arise in the study. And we found that, buyers expect this personalized, relevant, and consistent experience across channels, but that's not very easy to do when the marketing landscape keeps changing. So when we look at organizations, they're saying that they're struggling to keep up in today's landscape. Our research shows that over half say they struggle to diversify their channel mix and to deliver relevant content to customers along their buyer journey. So this is definitely a pain point that they're recognizing they need to acknowledge and fix. And while it's challenging, we all are aligned that these consistent brand experiences are critical. Over 90% recognize that an inability to deliver consistent brand experiences across media channels, this carries a very high cost. So it's critical that while it's difficult to deliver across these new touch points and in these new places, there needs to be a way to figure out how to do it and how to do it consistently. Because when you don't, you risk poor customer retention, bad customer experience, and even lower conversion rates. As companies are trying to make changes to make their strategy more cohesive, they're facing both organizational and technological challenges, looking at especially multiple point solutions. So when we surveyed, over half of the respondents said that multiple point solutions have impacted their organization's media effectiveness. This, when you combine with siloed strategies and teams, are making it really hard to attain the types of insights that they actually need to govern their activations and make more successful activations. But leaders do plan to invest in technology to optimize. Despite there being so many point solutions, there's still a desire to invest in the technology they need to deliver what they need. So leaders do recognize how important it is to make these investments to create that good, consistent experience for customers. And nearly half of the respondents that we talked to said that they plan to adopt technology to provide a more unified view of multiple buyer touchpoints. Finally, creative personalization at scale. Brands want to deliver personalized content, but that's hard to do with all of the challenges that we've talked about, from increased buyer touch points to data deprecation. These are all challenges that are making it harder for you to deliver that personalized experience that you want to. And we know that personalization at scale is also really difficult. Many companies feel like they're lacking the insights that they need to actually scale personalized creative across platforms in a way that both meets the customer's needs, but also the expectations that they have in those individual media channels, which is different depending on where they go. One B2B marketing leader actually told us that it's scary when you realize you have so many individual customers to manage, and pulling together all of the different teams, from strategists to data to creative, all of that takes work, and more headcount isn't necessarily the solution to scale the personalization. But we know that personalization is key for performance. We know that personalization is super powerful. And when it's done right, brands can actually address customer needs, they can create a mutual value exchange, and they can improve overall customer experience. And our respondents agree and corroborate that. 82% say that providing customers with a personalized experience across channels is important to them. So we're seeing that companies are adapting. Marketers are facing this perfect storm of issues like data deprecation, new emerging channels, buyer expectations that keep increasing. And this is making it harder and harder for them to develop really effective media strategies and also to deliver that consistent experience across every single stage in the customer journey and in every channel across the customer journey. So marketers are finding ways to adapt. They're doing a few different things. One, they're diversifying their channel mix. They recognize that the landscape is changing, so they need to change with it. But with that, marketers need to also develop a really tight comm strategy that addresses the different consumer pain points and expectations at every stage of the journey. The second thing, they're prioritizing insight led planning. So data is only as good as the insights that you can actually activate on. And marketers are investing in data to better inform the audience strategy that they have and the activations that they're putting forth. And finally, investing in automation. Delivering a cohesive brand experience, as we talked about, headcount can't necessarily scale it and do it for you. You need the type of automation and technology to help you deal with a labor intensive process that's not unified. So marketers are investing in new ways to automate their process and ultimately scale creative production to meet the customer needs that they have. So with that, thank you. We've really enjoyed working on this study and learning just as much about the changes in the B2B marketplace as you have.
Thanks, Kelsey, for sharing those insights. And I think they were pretty hard hitting stats in there. So we'll try to spend the next few minutes diving deep into some of those areas and offering marketers with best practices that can possibly help them navigate these challenges. So to begin with, I guess 90% of respondents said that buyer touchpoints have increased and that marketers are struggling with stringent privacy regulations. We also know that the world is preparing to navigate a cookieless environment, which we all know is pretty challenging. I know a lot of our B2B colleagues are trying to switch focus and prioritize an owned media strategy and also build a database of first party cookies. But we also know that that's a strategy that's hard to execute, expensive, and many of us have seen mixed results at the best, right? So, Kelsey, given your unique vantage point in the industry, what is your advice to leaders as they think about navigating this specific challenge?
Sure. I mean, I'd start with, as I talked about it just in the presentation, personalization is really important to marketers, and delivering an experience that feels personalized is also important to customers. But as you know, we talked about, it's getting so much harder to execute in that environment. So we are seeing that marketers are investing in data analytics, customer insights tech. In our more recent 2021 global marketing survey, 50% of global B2C marketing decision makers said that they were making an increased investments in that marketing budget for data analytics and customer insights technology. So again, we're seeing the investments happening. We're seeing marketers try to figure it out. And, you know, a colleague of mine, Steph Liu, writes a lot about privacy. And she said that she's also seeing that marketers are starting to prioritize what Forrester calls zero party data, which is essentially data that a customer proactively and intentionally shares with the brand. And being able to use that data helps you deliver a personalized experience that you might, that you might not otherwise, as you lose other data sources.
Great. And I think while the previous era was all about context, I think today consent is truly the king. And as long as you're able to capture consent and use it effectively, I guess you might be able to navigate some of these challenges. So, Andrew, looking to you, I know you work with hundreds of B2B marketers on the LinkedIn platform who are looking to solve this very challenge. Like, what is your advice to marketers who are looking to target specific audiences based on behavioral data or their specific target audience that they want to go after?
I think what we're seeing from B2B on our side is that it's no longer as feasible as it used to be to target your audience across many different channels and platforms. Part of that is because of the changing nature of privacy regulations, of course, which means marketers don't necessarily have the data they need to reach all those individuals across channels and devices. So one thing they're doing is they're getting back to basics. They're asking, who is the audience I'm trying to reach, the audience of decision makers, and where do they spend their time? So the customers we work with at LinkedIn generally come to our platform because they know we have over 800 million professionals, and they can target them using LinkedIn's own zero-party data. So that's member-provided data like job title, seniority, company name, a lot of those fields that are really important to B2B marketing. And because LinkedIn's providing that data, it does take some of the burden off the marketer to provide that or collect that data themselves.
Awesome. And the second topic is pretty close to my heart. And I think for a lot of B2B marketers, building a comprehensive view of the customer journey is the holy grail. But we also know that customer data is siloed across many different platforms, and companies have purchased point solutions between CRM, CDP, marketing automation software. And you know, all of these have made it really challenging for marketers to stitch that end-to-end view of the customer journey using one single platform. And without being able to do that, it's often hard to devise a campaign or a marketing strategy around. So we are also saying that B2B marketers are struggling to understand what their customers are looking, feeling, and seeing on channels that they engage on, which is like LinkedIn, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, or even podcasts. And this is what, as Sprinklr, we like to call as the digital edge. So, Andrew, one thing I would like to get your insights on is, how do you think best in class companies need to think about solving this challenge about creating a holistic view of customers and simplifying their marketing technology stack?
It's a great question. I can tell you anecdotally, more of our customers are asking questions about customer data platforms or clean rooms as ways to marry their data with the platform's own data in a way that also adapts to changing privacy guidelines. But I think that what B2B marketers have to their advantage is that they don't necessarily have to target one kind of customer or one kind of role hyper targeted across different platforms, because B2B buying decisions are generally made by a collection of stakeholders or a committee of stakeholders. So one thing we've been testing at LinkedIn is a solution called group identity for B2B, which allows marketers to target different kinds of roles and titles of stakeholders in the purchase process, but to do so in a way that hides individual anonymity in the crowd, statistically speaking. So it's more consistent with the evolving privacy landscape. And the advantage to that, again, is you're really going to be able to reach a lot of those decision makers, not just the VP or not just someone in the C-suite, but even some of the mid-level and junior level employees who can shape decisions within an organization. So the group approach, more of a broader approach, you might say, to targeting, is going to be advantageous to B2B going forward.
Awesome. And I think it's becoming increasingly important to not just target the C suites, but also the practitioners who are actually using the tools day in, day out. And contrary to popular belief, they seem to hold a lot of purchasing influence decision. They seem to hold a lot of influence on the purchasing decision, right? So it's great to hear LinkedIn's approach to solving that problem.
And I would jump in and add, actually, I think when we look at, you've talked about different persona groups. And I think, in lieu of being able to have a one-to-one, targeting approach, which frankly is not always the most effective because sometimes it's so costly and you worry about the return that you're getting on it. Thinking about those different persona groups and stakeholders that are part of the decision-making process and starting to sketch out what are the mindsets that they're in, what are the challenges that they're up against, what contexts are they, what context in which are they making decisions that you can start to target and show up within. So you can sketch out consumer journeys that maybe aren't as specific or down to the moment, but you can begin to understand, at a broader view, who are these people, what do they care about, and where are they making decisions, and start to develop a media strategy that actually hits them in those points of either, tension or even, points of delay, that you can deliver something that helps them or makes their experience better.
Absolutely. Great point, Kelsey. I think one of the other key takeaways from the survey was that almost every B2B marketer is struggling to deliver a consistent and personalized buying experience, which we all recognize as important for success. And I wanted to share a personal story of how I recently attended a webinar from a marketing software vendor. And I really thought the webinar was great and I loved the insights. But then guess what happened? I mean, they put me on a nurture journey where the emails that I received had nothing to do with the content of the webinar that I attended. And then all over again, I started seeing retargeting ads on LinkedIn and third-party websites. Again, nothing connected to what the content of the webinar was. So in many ways, I mean, if they had really truly understood who I was and what my priorities were, I could have turned into a sales qualified opportunity, and it was a huge loss for them. And as we saw in the survey findings, many companies are struggling with this problem, especially because different teams in the organization are building content, running campaigns, often to disparate sets of customer groups, and sometimes they overlap with each other as well. So, Andrew, how do you recommend that everyone in the marketing organization, or maybe everyone in the organization who's um, looking to engage with customers, how do you ensure that they're all aligned to one consistent brand vision and ensure that there is proper governance around building campaign content and creatives?
I think it's a great question. Best in class B2B organizations are generally aligning their marketing and sales teams in terms of the kinds of metrics that they want to track in marketing, in terms of which customers or company lists marketing is targeting. Are those lists important to sales? And then aligning on what are the key messages we want to get across throughout the funnel. Um, but let me also say that I think B2B marketers sometimes can become overly fixated, a lot of us do, on hyper personalization. And it can become problematic for a couple reasons. One, a lot of the data that B2Bs use to personalize marketing has often never been that great, especially if it's third party data. And two, with changes in privacy, a lot of the ways that you could personalize marketing nurture stream across the buyer's journey is just going to become less practical, less possible. Um, but there's actually some research that shows roughly 95% of all potential buyers for your company are not even in the market for the product you're selling or marketing at the time you're trying to reach them. In fact, so the vast majority of people out there are individuals who might not be aware of your brand. They might not have really begun the vendor evaluation or consideration process. And this is a great time to reach them with broader messaging, top funnel brand campaigns that help introduce them to your company or introduce them to thought leadership that's relevant to what you're offering. And when you take that broader approach, that brand building approach, it takes some of the onus off you to be very hyper personalized, to come up with very quick turn demand gen campaigns that have many complicated nurture streams. It allows you to go somewhat broader. That said, if you are looking to create that consistent content and messaging experience in your campaigns, there's a few things I think you should keep in mind. So the first one is create an emotional story, an emotionally relevant story in your messaging. There's this assumption I think we have that B2B buyers are just interested in dollars and cents, ROI, sort of so-called rational thought processes. But research shows that emotionally driven B2B campaigns are about 7 times more effective than what you might call a rationally driven campaign. I think a great example of this is Salesforce. You're probably familiar with the Trailblazer campaign that they've been running for many years. If you've ever been to Dreamforce, you've encountered that. That's, at the end of the day, they're marketing SaaS, they're marketing sales and marketing software, but they have a really strong emotional story at the core of it that lifts their customers up as heroes. And it features some really memorable characters as well. So that's one thing I'd encourage marketers to do is take that emotional approach. Second, what we're seeing on LinkedIn is to personalize content and the campaign experience. Marketers are retargeting their audiences based on a variety of intent signals or engagement signals. And with LinkedIn, they're able to get a lot of those signals natively through our platform. So that could be retargeting stakeholders based on website visits, video views. Has someone recently registered for one of their LinkedIn virtual events or filled out one of their LinkedIn lead forms? These are all things you can do right within the LinkedIn platform. So that's first party data that the marketer doesn't have to bring to us. We really can provide that for them as targetable data points.
Some fantastic insights and advice there, Andrew. It is true that 95% of the target audience is not even looking for the product that we are looking to sell. So it's important to keep that in mind and also really understand that ultimately you're marketing to human beings. You're not marketing to companies, right? And there are irrational decisions behind every purchase decision, and how do you appeal to the human quotient really, really matters. Kelsey, any additional thoughts or advice that you would like to add?
Yeah, I would add that I think there's 3 components to thinking through being consistent across clarity, consistency, and context. I think are all really important. So being crystal clear on which stages of the customer journey are you trying to target and what are your objectives and goals as you do that. Consistency, having a really clear understanding of who am I as a brand? What are the messages that we have? Even down to look and feel, especially in social media channels, when you think about social tone of voice down to what emojis do we use or not use is really important. So having that consistent tone and messaging is strategy. And then finally, the context. So where am I showing up? What channel expectations do we have? So just because one message works on one channel doesn't mean it's going to work on the other. And you need to think through format and think through what the expectations are from customers in each channel. So being, like I said, clear on your goals and where you are in the life cycle, being consistent with your brand voice and tone, and then finally having having a really good understanding of the context that you're showing up in.
Absolutely. So the last topic is again something that's close to my heart. As a B2B marketing executive, most of us live and die by pipeline. And sometimes you really lose sight of how buyers really make purchase decisions. And this goes back to some of the points we were making in the earlier question as well. So many important B2B marketing interactions are actually hard to track and measure, especially today when real chatter and conversations are happening across many channels that are hard to track. For instance, Reddit, WhatsApp groups, podcasts, communities, etc., etc. So, and because a lot of these channels are hard to measure and clearly attribute ROI to, a lot of B2B marketers shy away from actually investing in such efforts. Although we all intuitively know that a lot of purchase decisions do get influenced by the conversations that happen on those channels amongst peers, and there is tremendous value in actually using those channels to unlock how you would actually create awareness and drive demand for your products. So I mean, this question I would like to ask Andrew, and I know LinkedIn has launched many new cool features like creator mode. You have a LinkedIn live platform, and I also noticed that recently you've launched a LinkedIn collective group for B2B leaders. And clearly, all of these communities play a huge role in shaping buyer perception and driving engagement for your brand. How do you think, what's your advice to B2B marketers to truly articulate the value of these platforms? And people call this now the dark social, right? How do you think marketers can justify their investments in the so-called dark social?
It's a great question. I would go back to one point I made earlier, which is B2B marketers tend to fixate too much on running demand gen campaigns that deliver a certain number of leads at a certain cost per lead over, on average, a 2-week window. And those kinds of campaigns are generally not set up for success because B2B purchase cycles are long. And as we've discussed, most people who could one day become your customer aren't really in the market for your product now. So where you should be putting more of your dollars is at the top of the funnel, building your community on social, building awareness of your brand and interest in your brand, not so you can quickly convert those individuals to leads or customers or MQLs, but so when it does come time for those folks to evaluate potential vendors, you're in their consideration set. You're top of mind. They already have a favorable impression of your brand. And some research that we've done on our own platform shows that companies that have an engaged LinkedIn page actually see a 61% higher conversion rate and a 12% lower cost per conversion. But that's not because they're quickly trying to convert page followers into leads or customers. It's because they're taking the time to build that community, and down the line, that's paying off for them. There's also been some good third-party research across the industry that shows that the plurality of B2B buyers have only been exposed to a typical B2B ad 1 to 2 times or 1 to 2 impressions before they decide to make a purchase. So that means with just a little bit of investment in awareness, top funnel B2B brand building, you can actually drive meaningful sales growth. It's not necessarily a short-term quick solution, but it is the long-term play that's going to increase your bottom line down over the long run.
Absolutely. And Kelsey, your thoughts on this?
Sure. I mean, from the community side, I think it was interesting how you were talking about, just these emerging communities where so much conversation is happening. And when you look at, certainly that's definitely happening on LinkedIn as far as people really talking about specific topics, especially work related. But you're also seeing that on a channel like Reddit. And I think it's really interesting to see that becoming sort of a rising star channel for brands to begin investing in, particularly on the B2C side. And I think it's a really good way to look at those types of channels and new emerging things to engage with really engaged and niche communities and conversations. So you look at Fidelity, for instance, they have a Reddit channel that they're using as a customer service channel, and they're using that to build community. And they're thinking about, where are these financial conversations happening, and how can we meet customers and consumers where they are. And that's that happens in many different channels. But I think, again, thinking through that context of where are the conversations happening and where are the decisions happening, and how can we diversify our media channel mix to make sure that we're involved in those different conversations and contexts.
Awesome. I think those were really practical and actionable advice for a lot of B2B marketers who are struggling with these challenges. And I think the survey did a great job of articulating and laying the context for challenges that marketers are facing. And I think the conversation between us really helped us tease out some of the best practices that you guys have seen other companies employ. So thanks to both Kelsey and Andrew for joining us on this webinar. And I think it was a fantastic conversation. And I hope a lot of our audience derive value from this conversation. Thanks a lot for taking the time out again today.
Happy
Thank
to do
you.
it. Thank you for having us.